Well, so far we have.
Oh, there's Beth. Oh my goodness. I'm going to pour that now because I don't want it to get too shaken. There's cocktails. I can get into it.
So as everyone comes in, we will very much explain what Ruth is exactly pouring when we start the webinar. Hopefully she won't drink too much before we start the webinar.
Cheers. What a lineup.
Yeah.
It's great to see everybody.
Hello, good evening, good afternoon. We'll be starting in a minute or two. We'll just give everyone a chance to come on in and Ruth to have some more more drink.
And what about you, Keith? You must have your cocktail at the ready.
I have my cocktail at the ready. It is already pre-shaken and chilled with my artisanal bourbon-infused cherry.
Oh, very nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And is it home infused or purchased?
I'm embarrassed to admit that it's actually purchased, but it's purchased from a family firm that makes them by hand. Does that make it better?
Well, that sounds lovely.
So do you want to share with everyone your donkey picture behind you? It's always a topic of conversation whenever I chat with you on Zoom.
Well, you know, I think many people know that I love donkeys, and I'm a big supporter of the Donkey Sanctuary of Ontario, which is located in Guelph. And so I have a friend who's an artist, and I think every once in a while when he needs some money, he thinks, I'm going to just paint another donkey, and I know Ruth will buy it off me. So I have 4 donkey paintings by him.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
You're a real connoisseur of donkey pictures. So do you think we should get going, Ruth, or wait a little bit longer? Your call.
Well, there's a number of people on the line. Maybe one more minute, eh? Because I know there was quite a few people registered, and yeah. So maybe just one more minute.
We'll just, we have a lot of people registered this evening. We're so happy that this was a very popular offering. So we'll wait, as Ruth said, for a couple of a minute or so.
And I see some familiar names, which is lovely. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Jay. Hi, Joan. And then there's lots of phone numbers, so I don't recognize. And there's Ryan Fraser. Hi, Ryan.
Ryan Fraser on mute. This is a new experience.
My God. Like his vocal cords are severed.
Yeah. So Ruth, why don't we just talk about the chat function? Is that okay to sort of the rules of engagement, so to speak?
Sounds good.
Okay. So formally, thank you everyone for participating this evening. This is kind of a new experiment for the Canadian Association of Gift Planners and the Donor Motivation Program. Perhaps to give you some context of why we decided to facilitate this webinar is, unfortunately, as all of you know, we had to cancel the Regina conference because of this pandemic experience that we're all living through. And as also all of you that have participated in past conferences, one of the best things about the conference, we know the content is wonderful in the plenary sessions and the breakout sessions, but it's really what happens in between the sessions that we get as much out of as the formal sessions. And we have a chance to meet old friends and establish new ones. And quite frankly, a lot of these new friends and old ones are strengthened and met over cocktails or drinks or coffee or tea. So we decided, there you go, we decided that we would have this campfire chat and have a highlight of what is Ruth's favorite cocktail and what's my favorite cocktail. But Ruth, why don't you explain where the phrase Campfire Chat came from, why we decided to call these series of webinars Campfire Chats.
Well, I mean, I think we were talking about how can we just have some informal conversations on issues around philanthropy. And in many of our courses at CAGP, we do fireside chats. But who sits by a fireplace in June? And so we thought we sit by campfires. So let's call them a campfire chat. It's really like not super exciting, but you know, that's where it came from.
Yeah, and so many of you will be communicating with us and with each other through the chat function. Just so you know, we've got dozens of people registered for today. We won't have a chance to respond to you directly during the time we have together, but you're more than welcome to use the chat function to communicate with each other. And if you have any specific questions that come out from the chat app, we will respond to you directly afterwards. And our producer in the background, the lovely Serena Hack, who many of you are very familiar with, she'll be reaching out to you in the next couple of days with an email. And at that point, if you have any questions of Ruth or myself, please feel free to email to Serena and we'll make sure that we get back to you. So Ruth, I think we made the theme of this Campfire Chat our two favorite cocktails in the world. Why don't you explain where the hell the pivot came from, and is this your own name you called it, or did you steal it from somebody else?
No, this is my own name and it's my own cocktail.
Wow.
And I think it was just in response to, you know, sometimes the language that gets used out there in the sector in particular can get a bit lingo-y. And there were so many people talking about before the pandemic, now the pandemic, we need to pivot from one context to the other. And I got so sick of hearing about it. I thought, well, we should either have a drinking game or we should have a cocktail. And I thought, I took a weekend off and I focused and I said to the team, I'm coming back on Monday with a cocktail called the Pivot. And that's where it came from. And I think some people know my background as a microbrewery owner and studying to be a sommelier. And so this is an evolution of that other big interest in my life.
So now we know that you were a microbrewery owner, a lover of donkeys and donkey art. And Ryan, you're so funny that is not a picture of me in the background. He has such a great sense of humor, Mr. Fraser. My cocktail's not nearly as interesting as Ruth's. This is called...
It's a good one, though.
It's a good one. This is a good one. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have never had the last word, I encourage you to run, not walk to the... Well, if it's in Ontario, it's the LCBO. The rest of you are much more deregulated, thank God, than we are in Ontario. But it's equal parts gin, Luxardo, which is a cherry liqueur, lemon or lime juice, and also French chartreuse, which is the only liqueur that is so famous it had a color named after it, chartreuse. It packs a wallop. I also have a bourbon-infused cherry in here, very shaken over ice and poured. And I discovered this wonderful drink in Vancouver. For our Vancouver friends, you'll know that Hawksworth is an amazing restaurant with an amazing bar in the Hotel Georgia. And my entire family, unfortunately, my daughter was underage drinking at the time, was introduced to the last word of that time. So again, I encourage you to check out the last word. It'll make any webinar that you watch, that you listen to, go faster, go so much more entertainingly. So having said all that, I am the CEO of the Donor Motivation Program. Ruth is the CEO of the Canadian Association of Gift Planners. The last word's already kicked in here. We are actually in a unique perspective to have a pretty good bird's eye view of what's going on in the not-for-profit sector in Canada right now. And there's a lot of changes happening over the 90 days with the pandemic situation that we're all in. And I think, Ruth, the first question that I think all our audience would love to hear from you, and maybe I can add some perspective as well, is should we be fundraising? To what extent should we be fundraising? How aggressively should be fundraising? I know some organizations are sort of caught like a deer in the headlight right now, and some are moving forward with their strategic plans that they've pivoted pun intended, in the last 90 days.
Mhm.
What's your comment as CEO of the CAGP? What are you seeing going out there with your contacts?
Well, the quick answer is yes, absolutely. We should be fundraising at this time, but maybe in a slightly more nuanced way. And I think there's a lot of fundraising experts out there saying, do not back down right now. We can't give in to the fear that things are being tough and we need to back off. We're the help sector, but we're also the hope sector. And we have an opportunity to do just that, to inspire hope. So I think we need to focus on each stage of the react, respond, and rebuild. And CAGP has been part of the sector to respond, and I think we very much have an opportunity to be part of rebuilding. And CAGP is so well placed to do that because everything we do is so future oriented. It's an important part of recovering and rebuilding and the long-term financial sustainability in the sector. I mean, we're in this game because we believe in the opportunities of planned giving, but it's more about that. It's about mission and planned giving and the opportunity for planned giving to amplify a charity's success in achieving its mission. It's about diversifying revenue and democratizing philanthropy. And most importantly, it's about more than bequest. It's about access for everyone to the power of thoughtful, strategic, planned charitable giving. And I know you and your colleagues at the Donor Motivation Program know that intrinsically, right? That it's about taking a more measured, more thoughtful, more considerate approach to philanthropy and looking at ways to maximize the impact that you can have. So absolutely, it's a time to pause and connect with the cause, to hone in on the power that charities hold of their cause. I mean, one example I would give is that arts organizations have been impacted significantly by the pandemic. Their donations have tanked. Their revenue through engagement with their community is eliminated. But there's also strong arguments that we really need the arts right now more than ever in terms of recovery. And we're going to be highlighting that in our Frank Talks event later this summer. So yeah, absolutely. I think it's a time to be connecting with our donors, checking in first and foremost, but it's an opportunity for engagement and deepening those relationships.
So Ruth, what I've seen over the last 90, last 90 days or so is it's absolutely the wrong thing to, how should I put this, go to ground if you're a charity right now. If anything, you should be exponentially multiplying your communication with your donors.
Yeah.
And when it comes to planned giving, I mean, a lot of the questions that we're getting at the Donor Motivation Program is, can we really bring up planned giving in this environment? I mean, we're not using the word death. We all know you never use the word death around planned giving, and you always use life stories around planned giving. But of course, people are dying, and many of our target donors are older, and this is a major concern for them. Do you think, and what I'm hearing you is we should be asking, but how do we make that ask around planned giving? Is there some sort of secret sauce that is out there, or how would you go about doing it if you were approaching donors, if you were a CEO of a small to medium size or even larger charity?
Well, you know, I think it's about being honest and real with our donors. They're there because they care about our organizations, they want to help. And so I think while there's a hesitancy at this particular time, what's going on, it's also a time to talk to donors about legacy gifts. I mean, I think we've heard many of the stories about the unprecedented degree to which people are writing wills at this point in time. And if you've had some of those conversations with your donors in the past, in particular, like, revisit those, but don't shy away from those conversations. This could be the absolute moment to have them, especially at a time when they may be looking inwards and reflecting, and people may be hesitant to make current gifts, but they still want to be philanthropic and they still want to support a charity. And planned giving and a bequest is a great way to do that. And it's a great way when people who don't think of themselves as major philanthropists, they can make significant gifts in their estate. But also amplify their giving through other planned giving tools that are our current gifts as well, through, you know, smaller amounts of money that have big impact. Gifts of life insurance is another great example.
Yeah, I think the marketing professionals, the marketing experts have a line, and that is, you should try to join the conversation that's already going on in the mind of your target audience. Again, you should try to join the conversation that's already going on in the mind of your target audience. And the question is, are our donors, our target, those are our target audience, are they thinking about changing their estate plans in this COVID environment that we're all going through together? And many of us are thinking that our donors are just worried about their own health and the health of their loved ones, which of course is correct. But it's interesting, we've facilitated a couple of donor presentations online for 2 large charities in the Toronto area over the last 30 days. And we always ask polling questions during the donor presentation. And one of them is, have you considered revisiting your estate plans during this pandemic crisis that we're all traveling together? And in both cases, well over 50% of the audience said yes.
Yeah.
So understand this, for everyone that's watching and listening, your donors are thinking about their estate plans right now. The vast majority of them, they need help and direction on how to multiply their gifts and help you, those organizations that are making a meaningful difference in their lives because of their connection to you and what that meaning brings to them. I mean, Ruth, have you seen that as well?
Absolutely. And we know, now this is data out of the US, but we know that in times of economic distress, planned giving actually increases. It's one area of fundraising that actually goes up. So for charities, no matter where their organization is on the trajectory of having an established proactive planned giving program, it's clear that what we need as organizations to be resilient and sustainable is to think about planned giving. So it's never too late to start to improve or build on what you have. And the key thing is, it's long-term, it's longitudinal. It's going to help charities weather the next storm and put important pipelines of gifts into place that is going to support charities into the future. And I think we're seeing that donors absolutely want to have those conversations right now. That this is, again, a time where they are thinking about and reflecting on their life and the impact that they've had, how they want to be remembered, and that's exactly the niche of planned giving and what people see at this time.
Yeah.
So really, really critical.
So as we get through this crisis, and we will at some point get through it, what are those organizations, those nonprofits that, I mean, I think benefit is the wrong word, but what are those organizations' characteristics that will get through this and come out the other side stronger? I have some thoughts on that, but Ruth, do you have any insights or perspective from your point of view?
Well, I think so much of it comes back to relationships, connecting with, stewarding your donors, calling them, talking to them, listening to them, thanking them for their support, and telling them also what you're doing to respond and to weather the crisis. It's time to bring people closer to you, bring them into the family, into your community, to get to know people and to deepen those relationships. I think it's about connecting with your donors, like actually connecting with them, picking up the phone. And we did that with the CAGP Foundation. We picked up the phone, we called our donors. As CAGP, we talked to our members as well. Much of this applies to organizations that have members, that it's just the time to be out there, be front and center. It was Ryan, who we mentioned earlier, Ryan Fraser, who put out a screenshot of an advisor that said, charities, where have you gone? Because they weren't hearing from charities. And I think that gives a really strong sense that, no, we want to hear from charities. People want to hear from charities. Donors want to hear from charities. And I think in particular, we know that many Canadians have lost their jobs, but many have kept their jobs too. And I think there seems to be a heightened sensitivity around gratitude. A lot of people are having a hard time, but before they talk about the hard time they're having, they're expressing how grateful they are for what they do have. And and they see themselves then as having a responsibility to step in and help to make sure that those who are in need are cared for. And we need to build on that and keep those lines of funding open so that our important work can be carried on. And so, you know, historically in crisis, in previous recessions, it was the smart players who leaned into stewardship. Some donors can't give right now, and that's fine, but stewarding them, reaching out, not just to thank, but to engage them and start the conversation. That's the thing that's going to lead to donations down the road too.
And I think from my perspective, we often hear the phrase "the new normal" whenever that happened,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and I think what has occurred with this pandemic crisis is that, yeah, it's changing a lot of what's going on in society, but I think it's more accelerating the trends that already were occurring, both the for-profit and the not-for-profit world. The obvious trend is the movement to all things digital. This Zoom webinar is a really good example. I mean, 90 days ago, I don't think I even heard or knew what the word Zoom was or meant. Also, and I don't think this is going to be a surprise to anyone that's participating in this webinar, is that if plan giving wasn't important for charity survival before pandemic, it's obviously critical today and on a go-forward basis. Because we all know those organizations where 80+% of their revenue came from live events, from people getting together and donating to their favorite cause. And we all know those are gone and not to reappear for probably not to the earliest Q1 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So an acceleration of trends that were already in existence, digital being the major one, I think. The second is flexibility and the ability for an organization to swivel and unfortunately pivot. Pivot. Sorry. The ability of an organization to pivot and focus on, as I call it, the double bottom line, not only where their mission is doing the most, having the most positive effect, but also being honest with themselves and saying, okay, where should we actually pull back from? Everything we do has value, but what are the 20% that generates 80% of the results? And really, really focus in on that and get strategically clear on what you should continue to be doing, but equally what you shouldn't be doing. I mean, absolutely. And it goes without saying, diversification of fundraising streams. I mean, those organizations that really depended on groups of people getting together, raising money, it's going to be tough for them to get through this environment, unfortunately. And so you cannot be focused ever more on one form of revenue stream. And related to plan giving, endowment is really important. I mean, it's good to have some cash that you can fall back on in times of crisis like this. So plan giving, endowment, diversification of revenue streams, an acceleration of all things digital. We're seeing all these things happen right now in real time.
Well, and I know we've seen that organizations that have reserve funds, that have endowments, they are in a much greater position to weather this storm. And those are issues that we're going to be exploring in our Frank Talks later in August. And Serena, your colleague, is actually delivering one of the Frank Talks. But we want to be looking at the value of endowments and donor advised funds, and what's the balance between ensuring that these invested funds are there to provide long-term sustainability to the sector while also granting for immediate needs right now. I think that's an important conversation to have, particularly when there is a lot of spotlight shone perhaps on things like disbursement quotas in this particular point in time. But the other issue is around reserve funds and operating reserves. And organizations that have been fiscally responsible and have had operating reserves in place, they're in a much better place to weather this storm. But I wonder if that's going to change the conversation with donors and funders around their openness to supporting not just activities that meet frontline needs, but also support an organization's health and sustainability. And that's another issue we're going to be exploring with our Frank Talks as well. So I think we're on a real precipice of some change here, which is exciting. I think we have to look at the silver lining here and see what we can all do to adapt and respond.
And maybe that is a segue to a separate topic, but I know a relevant one that I've been asked this question by many CAGP members. With the cancellation of the Regina conference, this was our CAGP's major fundraiser of the year. And there was concern from some people as how is our organization that we've all come to know and for some of us love, is it going to be able to keep the lights on, quite frankly, given that we're losing tens of thousands. There was a concern we were going to lose over 6 figures as a result of the cancellation of the conference. Now, as a sponsor, the Donor Motivation Program received a call from you, I think the day after the cancellation, and you pled to not have to have our education sponsorship refunded. But I think this is a really good example. Please, yes. I think what you did was brilliant and is a good example of pivoting and showing flexibility to those funders that help you keep the lights on. So maybe you can explain what you did with all the sponsors of the CAGP conference, that as a result, you are definitely, the CAGP is going to keep the lights on and be here for many years, for decades to come.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a lifetime ago, but it was March 16th when we made the final decision to cancel our conference, which incidentally, I was looking back in my journal, and 7 years ago, March 16th was the day I signed my employment contract to join CAGP. So, things go in 7-year cycles perhaps, but we're learning every day. But I think I come back to the react, respond, and rebuild angle. And of course, the conference and what we did around that was very much reacting and, just getting on the phone and talking to our supporters to see how they might continue to support us and to pivot their support in a different way. And as I said, we did that with our members. And, first of all, I just want to say thank you to you and the many other supporters that stepped up and supported us. And, it really wasn't, my first gut reaction in those days in mid-March was not sure if we're going to make it. But then I was literally overwhelmed by the response from our members and our supporters. And, we're calling them CAGP heroes, because you really are. That's not disingenuous at all. They've been so generous in so many ways. But I think we also tried very quickly to move out of what was the reaction mode, because you can really spiral in that. Was a lot of reacting out there, and I think we wanted to just take a deep breath and be more thoughtful about responding versus reacting. And I think we saw a lot of that willingness and interest in our chapters, which are at our community level, and our chapters focusing on community and holding and participating in local conversations, not just with our members, but with the sector as a whole, to foster fundraising, recuperation, and reflect and address local community needs. And I think the other thing is our education team was immediately opened our ears to curate. We don't have all the answers. We maybe have some answers, but one of the things we did was, in the early days, hold a free webinar to share not just our expertise and our curriculum, but to also share what we're learning from others around the entire globe. What Paul, my colleague, and all of our friends calls the global plan giving brain trust. And I think that we've been able to pivot as quickly as we can to provide some really good resources. And our members have told us that. We've had members tell us, they so appreciate the work of CAGP and the CAGP Foundation. It's been a great time for their staff to catch up on some technical training, and the CAGP webinars have been really helpful in that. And so now we're kind of entering our next phase, I guess, the rebuilding. We're convening around real knowledge, so to speak. So it's been a really interesting ride. But I do feel confident we are certainly going to weather this immediate storm. And I mean, it's interesting, and you're on the board, Keith, and so you're very familiar with our strategic plan and how we talked a year ago about the need to be more nimble and access a broader market through technology. We put that in our strategic plan, and the pandemic maybe just accelerated that a little bit for us. And so we're going down that road, and you know, it's an interesting learning opportunity to think about how we can adjust some of the expertise that we bring and offer it in a virtual environment, but also integrate some of the high touch learning context that we're so good at, and to do that in a virtual setting. So it's been fantastic. And, you know, Zoom has been great. I think many of us are kicking ourselves that we didn't maybe buy Zoom stock back in, you know, March or early April, but it's been incredibly helpful around that.
So I think we're coming to the conclusion of our conversation, but as bad as things are, I believe, and Ruth, I think you'd be in agreement with me, that there are silver linings out there. And for those organizations like the CAGP and have leaders like you that are willing to be creative and adapt to a changing economy and changing environment, there are opportunities. There are absolutely opportunities, because we will get through this, whether it's a vaccine or whether the curve completely flattens. I mean, no one really has an answer. We just know that it'll happen at some point. I think some people might get frustrated if they think it's going to happen in September or think it's going to happen in December. We don't know when the good news and everything's going to go back to some semblance of normalcy, but it will occur. And what we're trying to do with these Campfire chats, which actually came about because of your creativity and allowing us to put our brand with your brand, is we're going to have these on a fairly regular basis. We're going to be going across the country, and we have DMP professionals that are going to be having these type of conversations with, I hate this word or words, thought leaders in different parts of the country in the not-for-profit sector. Our next one, which I'm certainly going to tune into, is on June 25th, which Glenn Stewartson, who's with the Donor Motivation Program in Halifax, is going to be having a conversation with Jeff Graham, who is a national board member of the CAGP, but he's also very involved with the QE2 Health Foundation. And we've talked a lot about the acceleration of all things digital. And this is going to be a major component of their conversation. What are you going to have to do to survive in this environment? And what will you be doing down the road to be successful with your donors as we open up in the future? So I hope you'll join us on the 25th for Glenn and Jeff. And I did say, or at least we did say in the invitation, we tried to keep this to about a half an hour. We just wanted to have a short cocktail conversation. I can finish the rest of my drink. Unfortunately, I can actually feel myself starting to slur some words, Ruth, so maybe it's a good time to...
getting a little warm in here.
It's getting a little warm. Any closing remarks, comments that you would like to make to our friends in the audience?
Well, I just want to say thank you, Keith, to you and Serena in particular, and the Donor Motivation Program for all of your support. And I think just creating room to have these conversations in a very informal way and share ideas and support each other, and, you know, talk about maybe what we've learned, what's working, what's not working. I just think it's really great to have these sort of open sharing venues, and, you know, to sit around a campfire together and have a cocktail and, you know, and share. And so I'm really grateful for the opportunity for CAGP to be part of this.
Well, thank you so much, Ruth. And I know many of us, if not all of us, feel that CAGP is less an organization and almost a family. I mean, that's how I feel. I know that's how you feel. And I'm sure that's, as I said, how many of our audience members feel. So to our fellow family members, again, thank you so much for tuning in this evening, late afternoon, wherever you are in Canada. And hopefully you'll have an opportunity to tune in on the 25th. Thank you very much, everyone. Stay healthy and stay well. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.